This is Lisa from Mobile Tech Review, and this is the Samsung Notebook 9. Again, this is the 2017 model. I reviewed the 2016 model, and I liked it a lot, actually, as one of the super, ultra, crazy, madly light 13-inch Windows laptops. It's still very, very light, where LG with the Gram is kind of morphing towards your average Ultrabook in some ways, adding a touchscreen, bigger battery, more weight. Samsung's still going all out with super light, 1.8 pounds. That is less than a kilogram, well under a kilogram. Pretty amazing. Intel Core i5 and i7 7th generation CPUs. SSD inside, of course, up to 16 gigs of RAM. Did I say very light? Still metal casing, redesign. We're going to look at it now. For you Samsung Notebook 9 newbies, first, what is it? It is your standard Core i5 and Core i7 Ultrabook, Intel 7th generation Kaby Lake 15-watt dual-core CPUs inside, available with 8 or 16 gigs of RAM, 256 gig SSD. Why does it exist? Well, just like last year when both Samsung came out with their last generation Notebook 9 and LG came out with the Grams, it's for people who want to carry the least weight possible without giving up on performance or screen size, since we have 13.3 inches and this is also available with a 15-inch. So it competes to a certain extent against the Acer Swift 7 we recently reviewed, which arguably may be even prettier. And is super duper thin, but only has an Intel Core M. So for those of you who want more horsepower, for example, and you can see the difference in the footprint there. Noticeably smaller for the Samsung. In fact, Samsung really, by reducing bezels even further, not that the last gen had that big a bezel, did a very good job. Here's the XPS 13, which is, of course, one of the smallest footprint 13-inch laptops, and you're looking at about the same thing. That's remarkable. But the Samsung is more than a half-pound lighter, 0.82 kilograms, 1.8 pounds. So still very light. And here's the ThinkPad X1 Carbon, latest 7th generation Kaby Lake, 14-inch screen. So it's going to have a bigger footprint just because of that. But this is one of the lighter ones at around 2.5 pounds. It's still significantly heavier than the Samsung. So it's for those of you who really value portability. Now, what are you going to give up with this? It's all metal casing, but it's going to have thinner, lighter panels. If I drop a ThinkPad, what I worry about is the dent in the floor. If I drop this, I would worry about it denting. Now, there's a certain amount of give built in, sort of like the old Vios used to do with carbon fiber to protect it from some dents. But, you know, I would be careful with this. I'm careful with all laptop computers anyway, that said, but that would be a concern. Now, the lid, let's get our Dell out of the way right here, is the most flexy point on it. And if you push in, it's going to give some. Now, that's not unique. There are other laptops that have flex. And if that bothers you, well, there that is. The bottom is very rigid. Now, it's still, you can still push it like that. This panel will flex like that. But if you grab the notebook and do the torsion test, it does not flex at all. The base doesn't flex at all. The lid will flex. Of course, that's, again, not unusual on laptops, but you've got some ability to flex it there. So that's the price you're paying for the ultralight design. Now, Samsung actually didn't thin this up from the last generation. I think because they wanted the rigidity that a bigger casing would afford. They've obviously redesigned it. The last generation we looked at had a kind of bare bones version of the old Series 9 look, a notebook that I thought was really gorgeous with the teardrop design here and the chamfered metal edges tapered to almost nothing. It was a less classy version of it last year. I wasn't in love with the design. It was okay. So now they've gone to kind of like a MacBook Pro like lozenge design. And that's because those curved corners give it a lot of rigidity. It's not bad looking. At first I thought, well, that's a little bit plain. And then it grew on me actually. And I like the clean minimalist look. Now that's up to you. LG with their Gram, which is available in 13, 14, and 15-inch sizes now, has probably what most people think of still as a better look. It's a dark gray finish, almost like a space gray, with a matching keyboard. And, you know, aesthetically speaking, I'll leave it up to you to decide which you like better. They're both about equally as rigid or not rigid, as it turns out. The LG Gram went in a different direction, though. It actually got a little bit thicker, and it didn't get any lighter, that's for sure. It's heavier than this, 2.04 pounds for the 13-inch, and that's because they put a bigger battery in. So you do get good battery life as a result. So there are things to say for the LG, good things to say as well, obviously. The keyboard, well, I didn't like it as much. Anyway, we'll review the Gram too. Maybe we'll even get to do a smackdown. So how much is this Featherlight madness going to cost you? Well, not as much as you might think, which is a nice thing. I know usually you pay a lot for that kind of portability. They're keeping the price down. Samsung's done a good job with that. So we just looked at the Acer Swift 7, which was $1,100 with an Intel Core M, the one that I just showed you in comparison. So for this, with $999, you get the Intel Core i5-7200U, 8 gigs of DDR4 RAM, and a 256 gig SSD, 1080p display, no matter what, on board here. It's not too bad. And this is the Core i7-7500U that we have here with 16 gigs of RAM, 256 gig SSD, and that's $1199. Now, the real head turner in terms of what you get for the price is the 15-inch for those of you who want a bigger footprint, because you're going to get a faster SSD, you're going to get dedicated graphics in there too. No matter what, the ports are pretty good considering how ultra light and portable this is. You have two USB 3.0 ports. You have a USB-C, that's Gen 1 3.1, 5 gigabit per second port. It does support display out for those of you who want to use it for that. You have a full-size HDMI, not even the tiny kind. Of course, the wonderful headphone jack and a charging port and a microSD card slot too. So opening it up and taking a look inside, well, the same design aesthetic goes on there. Curves, light silver, you get the idea. Bezels are not very big at all, particularly on the sides, and that's true of the last generation too. There's a little bit of a bezel up top, but that's so you can have your 720p webcam in the normal location. The LG Gram moves it down to the hinge in the barrel area because they went with a very, very, very tiny top bezel as well. I think it's fine. This is not what I consider huge bezels. It's a 1920 by 1080 Bohidus made display. For those of you who know, it's not a PLS Samsung display, so it's your traditional IPS. Nice looking, non-touch. Again, LG has moved over to touch, which adds some weight and consumes some battery power. So difference here, Samsung's still going for making purely the lightest 13-inch Ultrabook on the planet. Keyboard has low travel, but you know what? It's surprisingly not bad. Just like the last generation, you would think it would be terrible, but I found I type really well on it. I like the keyboard really surprisingly well. It has 3-stage backlighting. It's sort of a yellowy green color. It's okay. It contrasts with the silver keys. It gets the job done. It's nice to have 3-stage backlighting. And notice that there's this button right there is the fingerprint scanner for Windows Hello Login. So you got a fingerprint scanner built in. And a Microsoft Precision trackpad. Now, Samsung adds some software customizations and settings, so they have some features that they've added on top of that for navigating page forward, page back, which you can disable. In fact, they are turned off by default. But it's a Precision trackpad, and it works as well as any other Microsoft Precision trackpad, like that on the Dell XPS 13. It's good. All right, so here we are inside. Remove the Phillips head screws. It helps if you have a little suction cup to pop this off. This is metal. Sounds like metal, looks like metal. Interesting stuff here, the little baffles they've got going on, but it's very thin stuff, which it has to be this light. It's interesting architecture. Battery taking up most of the space inside. Actually, they had a room for a little bit more battery if they wanted. It looks to me 30 watt-hour battery, and it's comprised of 2 cells with a bridge, it looks like, for a design, so they could fit it in here. And what a tiny motherboard this is. Wow. In fact, the I/O daughter board actually had to go off, connected by a ribbon cable over here for your ports. So we have our RAM is soldered on board with this. There's no room for a RAM slot in something this tiny. And we have a M2 SSD. Again, this is using a SATA interface, not PCIe NVMe on the 13-inch. However, on the 15.6-inch, you do get a PCIe NVMe SSD, which is not bad, actually, for the price there, for that $12.99, considering. But you also get NVIDIA 940MX graphics, too. Speakers are over here. And this over here is the Wi-Fi card, not socketed. Obviously, these are the antenna connectors for Wi-Fi and Bluetooth. And this is Intel 8265AC, which is the latest generation Intel wireless 802.11ac card. So there you have the internals, and obviously the fan is right there. So impressive and somewhat unusual architecture. A motherboard that's pretty much that size is wow. So again, full HD display, that's your only option, 1920 by 1080 IPS. It's a glossy screen. It's gone are the matte screens that Samsung used to use in the Series 9 days, but it's relatively speaking very unreflective, which is nice. Certainly noticeably less reflective than, say, the Dell XPS 13 display. So you've got Samsung settings here to let you control the color balance. That's nothing new for Samsung. They've been doing that in their laptops for a while, and it's a lot like what you see on Samsung smartphones. So you can choose photo editing, which I've chosen as a kind of color neutral and color accurate, and pretty close to just spot on good calibration if you care about color accuracy. There's a dynamic mode that's kind of HDR, it enhances the colors and so on, and a couple of other presets, including automatic, where it tries to decide for you. And separately, there's an HDR switch, and if you flip that, colors get more saturated, contrast goes up, though the colorimeter doesn't really measure anything different in terms of gamut or contrast. It just looks more visually appealing to most folks who are fond of HDR these days. There's also an outdoor brightness mode. Samsung claims 350 nits of brightness. We measured 338, but it goes up to 465 nits according to our colorimeter when you use outdoor mode. I mean, this will burn your retinas if you try this at night, at home in the dark, folks. It's really very effective. Black levels, you can see on screen there, and contrast ratio, pretty decent. So overall, a very nice display, but no touch options. Sorry about that. Gorgeous display, a pretty decent keyboard and more. This is the speakers at 75% volume here. Not very loud, folks. Not very full, not very rich. This is the price penalty for something this thin, this light, this small. You get the idea. It's usable, you know, as something that you can actually hear when it's sitting right in front of your face. It's not going to fill a room with sound and be a great experience for movies. You're going to want to use headphones for that. In terms of performance and heat, though it's fairly slim and it's obviously clad in metal, it doesn't get that hot. Running graphics benchmarks was about the best way to get this thing heated up, since this is obviously no gaming laptop. It's using integrated graphics. And you can see our color measurements here to show you where it's bright yellow, it's the hottest, and it doesn't get too hot. Performance is just like any other Core i5 or Core i7 Ultrabook of the Kaby Lake and pretty much Skylake generation. You have Intel HD 620 integrated graphics. If you go for the 15-inch, that's a pretty nice proposition there, because you get NVIDIA 940MX dedicated graphics. Now that's a low-end dedicated GPU, but it's enough to make a difference in Lightroom and Premiere and programs like that. And you get a faster NVMe SSD, so there's some nice things going on with that 15-inch, and that's $12.99, which is pretty important because the LG Gram is starting around $16.99 for a comparable configuration. That does net you a touchscreen, but you don't get any dedicated graphics. So overall, I have to admit I'm pretty impressed that something this ultra portable can perform as well as it does. And by the way, you're not going to hear the fans very much. I mean, the fan rather, single fan, it's not very big and it never gets very loud. You can hear it if you're pushing it hard, but it's not a whole lot of noise. All in all, Samsung's really done a very good job here. Battery life, well, you know, a 30-watt-hour battery is on the small side for an Ultrabook with an Intel Core i5 or i7, and we do have the i7 here. But Samsung does a pretty good job with power management. Now, I've seen a couple of owners report that they had short battery life, and I'm not sure. I mean, like, absurdly short battery life. I don't know why that is, unless they're running it in the outdoor brightness mode, because that, as Samsung warns you, will kill the battery really fast. Kill the charge, that is. The included charger is 45 watt. It supports fast charging. It's a barrel charger. So it plugs into a pin. It doesn't use up one of your ports, but you can use a USB-C charger too, as long as it provides enough power. Look at the voltage rating on your charger to figure that out. But we did test it with the MacBook charger. It worked just fine there. And I used my Google Pixel charger, and that also worked to charge it. But given how compact the charger is that's included, it's not much bigger than the smartphone charger. And the fact that it does fast charging, and you can top up like 50% of the battery in an hour, I would stick with using the included charger, actually. So battery life, I've been averaging at 40% brightness, which is quite bright on this laptop given the bright display, around 7 to 8 hours of light use. And that's Word, Excel, doing some edits on the web, streaming some video. I had it running YouTube videos continuously, which can be demanding because some of those are still in Flash format, which is more demanding of the battery, and it lasted typically 7 hours, streaming a mix of Adobe Flash and HTML5 video. So that's not bad. Certainly anything with a bigger battery can potentially do better. The LG Gram, in fact, has gone up to a 60-watt-hour battery. That's twice the capacity. But if you get the 15-inch of this, by the way, you get a 66-watt-hour battery, so it should have more staying power. So there you have it, a Windows 13.3-inch Ultrabook with full Intel Core i5 and i7 CPUs that's not much heavier than an iPad Pro. It really is remarkable. It really is enjoyable. You know, once you pick it up, you feel the difference. You say, wow, This would be nice. So that's the target audience, those of you who want something that's really light. Do you travel around a lot? Do you carry a lot of gear? Do you not want to have to carry a heavy laptop? Well, that's who this one is for. I'm Lisa from Mobile Tech Review. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more cool tech videos, and thumbs up if you like this video.